Scarlet Spider. He's a fan favorite character who to the everyday Marvel movie watcher may not be very well known. There have been more than one person to take up the mantle of Scarlet Spider. The first, who most people would be referencing and my favorite, is Ben Reilly, who first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 149. But the Scarlet Spider name has been used by a few others, including Joseph Wade, more on him later, Kane from Web of Spider-Man number 119, or any one of the Scarlet Spiders who, during the initiative, were cloned from the genetically perfect body of MVP, 3 of which were replicas of Spider-Man's Iron Spider costume as a team of Scarlet Spiders, though most had been killed off by the end of the initiative. Speaking of clones, coming in at number 9, clones. Almost every character who held the Scarlet Spider name was a clone. Ben Reilly was the first to show face, created by Miles Warren, the Jackal, as a perfect genetic clone of Peter Parker. He disappeared after his fight with Peter and returned later as Ben Reilly. The other well-known one, Kane, was also a clone created by the Jackal, only he was imperfect. So not only does he live in the shadow of Peter, he's got the insult of cellular degradation. After he healed, he also became Scarlet Spider. I already mentioned the Scarlet Spiders, and then there is Joseph Wade, who wasn't a clone at all, but again, more on him later. Number 8. Upgrades. Not just upgrades, actually. Ben Reilly, after returning to New York and becoming a hero, made sure to make himself separate from Peter Parker's Spider-Man by using a costume that was different enough. It actually looks very comfortable sporting that sleeveless hoodie. Apart from the red suit and blue hoodie, Ben made upgrades and differences to his web shooters, adding impact webbing and stingers, which are paralyzing darts he could use in battle. Kane, on the other hand, didn't really make upgrades at all. Instead, he just used a modified stolen Spider-Man stealth suit. This is partly why Ben is better. Hold up. I just want to say thanks for watching. Hit me with a comment below about which version of Scarlet Spider or even Spider-Man is your favorite, and don't forget to drop a like. Alright, let's move on to number 7. Number 7! The Other. With the Moon Knight comics giving us the idea of humans becoming the avatar for deities in the MCU, I thought it would be fun to talk about the Other. In the comics, a lot of the spider-like characters, of which there are many, supposedly have to thank a giant spider totem deity called the Other for their abilities. After Peter Parker lost his will to live to Morlun, he was offered resurrection by the Other, and he took it, becoming the Other's avatar, although bargaining to reject some of the less than savory aspects of that transformation. After Kane Parker's release from his mortal coil, he was chosen as the new avatar for the Other, becoming like a spider, like a man-spider, Spider-Man, man-spider. That is really confusing. You get it. Number 6. The Jackal. Both versions of Scarlet Spider have gone to the afterlife and come back from it. Ben Reilly's run-in with the End was a bit worse in my opinion though. You see, after his initial departure from life thanks to clone degeneration, he was brought back to life by his own creator, the Jackal. But not just once. No, the Jackal brought Ben Reilly back 27 times, meaning he met the afterlife 27 times. Almost understandably, this drove him to the point of insanity. He escaped and replaced Miles Warren as the Jackal and dastardly vowed to clone the whole world. He was eventually defeated and went back to being the Scarlet Spider, but he was forever struggling with the whole insanity thing, and would be a bit more of an anti-hero, doing things both heroic and criminal in nature. Number 5. His name. Not the Scarlet Spider name, that just sounds really cool. I mean his actual name. Ben Reilly. Ben chose this name for himself, and comic book fans can connect the dots to figure out where it came from. But for those of you who need an explanation, allow me. Being a clone of Peter Parker, and even believing he was Peter Parker for a while, he has a deep connection to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. So Ben is obvious, in memory of Uncle Ben. But Reilly would be the maiden name of his Aunt May, coming together to give us Ben Reilly. Love it. As for our other clone, Kane Parker, again, the Parker part of things is more than obvious, but he initially went by just Kane for a while, inspired by the burn marks his imperfected spider clone abilities would leave on his enemies. But once Peter took him in as a brother, he was given the Parker last name, so yay. Number 4. New Warriors. The New Warriors are a team that first appeared in 1989, and they were a team of superpowered teens, whose most famous member, at least in my opinion, would be Nova. The team was around for all of the 90s, pretty much all the way up until, as part of a reality show, they accidentally started the superhuman civil war. That isn't really the best thing to have as your claim to fame, but hey, everyone makes mistakes. While Spider-Man teamed up with them from time to time, Ben Reilly was the first spider hero to join the team when Spider-Side steals a contagion isotope from Gene Tech, and the Warriors are hired to look into it. But he would eventually leave the team when he took up another heroic pursuit. Unsurprisingly, Ben Reilly, much like Peter, isn't really a fan of letting people know his secret identity, which causes some tension in the team. What kind of seals that tension is when a certain someone named Joseph Wade shows up. Number 3. Evil Scarlet Spider. Okay, now we can talk about that other Scarlet Spider, Joseph Wade. So we know he isn't just another Peter Parker clone. So who the heck is this guy? FBI agent Joe Wade was assigned to investigate Dr. Octopus, who at this time was not Otto Octavius, who was de-lifed by Kane. Dr. Octopus was Carolyn Traynor, the daughter of one of Ben's close friends. That's the Scarlet Spider connection. While investigating Carolyn, Joe was kidnapped by her and he was turned into a silver-skinned, hard-light duplicate version of Scarlet Spider, going around committing villainous deeds to make the real Scarlet Spider look bad. Eventually, Joe became a real mechanized Scarlet Spider with superhuman strength and speed. He had claws on his fingertips and he could also fire webbing from his wrists, crawl up walls, and interestingly, fire laser stingers from his eyes. It took Ben Reilly teaming up with the New Warriors to finally be able to stop him, and then they kind of fell out of love with him. Number 2. Death. In Marvel Comics, there is a cosmic entity known as Death. She represents decay and destruction in the universe. There's a group of characters who have become heavily connected with this character for different reasons. Thanos is one of the big ones, being driven to de-life many people to try and appease her and win her affection. Kind of one of the reasons he tried to assemble the Infinity Gauntlet in the first place. Another would be Deadpool, who is also incredibly in love with Death. But another character with less of a lovey-dovey relationship with Death is Ben Reilly, who intrigued Death when he was resurrected all those many times. She would often mess with him, but has also helped him on a few occasions, like when she healed the clone deformation and when she resurrected Kane and another boy. I always find it interesting when this grim cosmic entity shows up in comics. Number 1. He became Spider-Man. Remember how Ben left the New Warriors to pursue other heroic endeavors? This was it. After being convinced that Ben was actually the original Peter Parker, Peter had a bit of an identity crisis and departed from the Spider-Man name, giving up the mantle to Ben Reilly, who took it on with a new look that was similar to the original but with some minor changes to do with color choices and logo placement. This is also where we saw Ben face off against Venom and develop those technologies we talked about before. This is where Ben's fate lay, and it was what Marvel was working their way towards for quite a while. He remained Spider-Man for quite a few years until he was brought to an end thanks to Norman Osborn. He died saving Peter from one of Goblin's attacks, which actually proved to Peter that he was indeed the true Peter Parker when Ben's body dematerialized like the other clones did. This brought the clone saga to an end, but Ben would return as no one as popular as him could be gone for too long.
Number 10. Inhuman. Black Bolt gets his power from the collective powers of his people, known as the Inhumans. What is an Inhuman? It's kind of like a mutant like the X-Men are, but different. It's actually also kind of like an Eternal, to be honest. Instead of being born with an X gene, the power for Inhumans isn't inherently activated at any point, and the potential to manifest powers comes from their bloodline and lineage. Miss Marvel, aka Kamala Khan, who will have her own Disney Plus series airing soon, is known for being an Inhuman. Her powers manifested when she was exposed to the Terrigen Mists, which appeared on Earth. It was in this way that Kamala even learned she was a part of the Inhuman family tree. Although, I'm not sure they're gonna go that route with Kamala in her Disney Plus series. I don't even think she's gonna be an Inhuman, but I guess we'll see what happens. Black Bolt himself was born with powers because he underwent Terrigenesis while in his mother's womb, with her being experimentally exposed to the mist while she was pregnant with her son Blackagar. Number 9. Kree Connection. The Kree are coming in. Coming in hot. I don't know what this dance is. That's the Kree dance, I guess. The Inhumans are actually a race that were in fact created by the Kree. If you've heard me talk about the Eternals before to explain their origins, you know that they were created by the Celestials who experimented on humans to create this new race of beings about 1 million years ago, also creating their enemies, the Deviant race. Similarly, the Inhumans were a result of Kree visiting Earth and experimenting on humans also a long time ago, finding a way to bring out hidden potential within them and basically creating the Inhuman race, who have the potential to manifest superpowers. The Kree had planned to use the Inhumans along with other genetically altered races of their design across the cosmos to use in their seemingly never-endless war with the Skrulls, but this plan ended up being abandoned by the Supreme Intelligence. And now there isn't even a war between the Kree and the Skrulls in the comics anymore, because now we have the Alliance, which is them together. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show our channel some love on a different platform, you can head on over to Facebook and give us a like and a follow. It really does help us out, so thank you. Number 8. Yes, that is his real name. Black Bolt is Inhuman royalty. When we are first introduced to him in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he is introduced as Blackagar Boltagon, leading Steven to respond upon hearing his name, "Really?" And yes, that is really his name, even in the comics. His brother Maximus is also a Boltagon, but I suppose considering that Black Bolt is considered to be one of the primary, if not the primary Inhuman hero in the world of Marvel, it makes sense, as absurd as it sounds, that his name would be an alliteration. A lot of heroes created early on had names that would be considered alliteration. Alliteration is when the beginning of a word next to another word or close together with another word both begin with the same sound or letter, such as Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Reed Richards, Scott Summers, or even Betsy Braddock, or even Blackagar Boltagon, or Black Bolt. Number 7. King of the Inhumans. Not only is Blackagar Boltagon an Inhuman, but as I said, he's also royalty. He is actually the king of the Inhumans. He ended up inheriting the responsibility of ruling monarch due to him being the firstborn of the previous king and queen, Aegon and Rhaenda. Tragically, Black Bolt inherited the throne after the untimely death of his parents. They died as a result of one of Maximus's villainous plots, albeit by accident. Maximus's plot wasn't necessarily to kill his parents, but he was conspiring with the alien race known as the Kree. As a result, when Maximus attempted to escape in one of the Kree ships, Black Bolt was forced to use his great power, his voice, to prevent the ship from getting away. Tragically, it fell out of the sky and then kinda crash landed into the Parliament building, destroying it and killing their parents and a few other important Inhumans of note. Black Bolt was crowned thereafter as the new king. Number 6. Maximus. Yes, Black Bolt does have a brother, and while Black Bolt is typically known for being a hero, his brother is actually more known for playing the role of the villain. Maximus is Blackagar's younger brother, who is typically referred to as Maximus the Mad. Maximus has the Inhuman superpower to mind control others, read their minds or alter their minds, even being able to alter their personalities. He's also known for being a genius, an evil genius. Often Maximus uses his power set to try and take over the throne, attempting to rule in his brother's place after having him deposed. He also has, however, used his powers to try and help Black Bolt from time to time, but the two have a similar dynamic to, I would say, Loki and Thor. Typically Maximus can't or shouldn't be trusted, but you know, sometimes they do team up and do things together. Basically, if Maximus is like, yeah, I guess this thing is like worse than I think you are, so I guess I'll team up with you. That's usually how it goes. Or I think there was a time when he wasn't considered like mad anymore and he was kinda cool for a bit. Number 5. The floating city of Attilan. The Inhumans typically live in the floating city of Attilan. Well, it's not always floating, but for a good amount of time it did exist over Manhattan and was actually floating above it. Either Attilan is typically on Earth, floating somewhere around there, or is located on the moon, where it's also existed for a good amount of time in the comics. There have also been times when Black Bolt and his people, the Inhumans, have been without the floating city of Attilan and basically were kinda like homeless for a while. At one point that happened and no one even wanted to allow the Inhumans to stay in their nation on Earth due to prejudice against the Inhumans thanks to the machinations of the Hidden Ones. The only person and nation at the time that would welcome the Inhumans would be Doctor Doom and his nation of Latveria. Ultimately, after the issue of Earth's prejudice against the Inhumans was resolved, even though Doom had offered Black Bolt and his people a place in Latveria, the Inhuman King refused him and instead chose to return to the moon and rebuild Attilan. It's kind of a very sick burn. Poor Doom. Doom's like, I mean, I'll let you guys stay here, and they're like, actually, no. Number 4. Medusa. Medusa is another very important person in Black Bolt's life, widely being considered his one true love. Black Bolt actually has had multiple wives, having to do so to basically help reconnect and bring together the alien and human races when they rejoined with their Earth-based brethren. However, of his multiple required marriages, Medusa was the only one that he was really married to that he loved. Medusa is also an Earth-based Inhuman like Black Bolt, and in fact the two of them are second cousins by marriage. marriage, which is kind of typical, at least historically, of a royal marriage like theirs. A lot of royals tend to like marry in families. A lot of inbreeding and royalty. Ooh. Medusa and Black Bolt aren't always together in the comics, but they do frequently end up back together in the end. Medusa's power lies in her long red locks of hair, which she can manipulate and control like limbs. Her hair is not only tensile and agile, but it's also super strong. Not something you'd want to get tangled up in, trust me. Medusa is typically known as Queen of the Inhumans, but is currently known as Commander Medusa. Now thinking about that, people are probably gonna be like, actually I would want to get tangled up in Medusa's hair. I mean, I think you'd only want to do that if she likes you. Otherwise, don't do it. Number 3. Inhumans TV show. While Black Bolt makes his Marvel Cinematic Universe debut in the Doctor Strange sequel, you might still recognize the actor who plays him, and even the character. This is because Anson Mount reprised the role for the MCU. He actually first played Black Bolt in the sadly unsuccessful Inhumans TV series. While most fans enjoyed Mount's portrayal of Blackagar, it unfortunately wasn't enough to keep the show going, and it was cancelled before even all of its first season episodes aired. Ouch. Still, seeing Anson Mount reprise his role for the MCU is pretty awesome, especially if you were a fan of the Inhumans TV series, which I'm sure there were some people that were. I think there are some fans out there for Inhumans. Yo, we're those Inhumans TV series fans. Let me know that you exist in the comments. I know you're out there. Number 2. First appearance. Black Bolt might be new to a lot of people who are more MCU fans than comic book fans, but the character has actually been around for a really long time in the comics. Black Bolt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue number 45 back in 1965. Yeah, he's an old and quite established character at this point. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four is also very fitting considering how the Inhumans would continue to have a close relationship with the FF throughout their history, especially when it comes to Black Bolt and his wife Medusa. Medusa even at one point was dating Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, and Medusa's sister Crystal, an Inhuman who can control and influence the elements and who is also considered Inhuman royalty, also at one point dated the Human Torch. In fact, they actually had like quite a relationship. Yeah, if you're also wondering, yeah, there's lots of love triangles abound there, as you can imagine. Medusa and Crystal being sisters, and then Johnny, and then obviously Black Bolt's around. It was a time. Number 1. Powers. So we know Black Bolt has a powerful voice from his appearance in the MCU, but how exactly does that work? Well, it actually all has to do with the speech center of his brain, which can basically harness the power of electrons and ambient particles. In fact, you know that tuning fork that he wears on his head? That's not just a weird costume choice, it actually helps him to more fine-tune his powers. Although it also, I think, is very fitting that he wears like a tuning fork and he's using voice powers. It's kind of fun. Black Bolt is believed to be one of the most powerful Inhumans to have ever existed, which means that even using his powers to begin with had dire consequences, like when he accidentally caused the death of his parents. Black Bolt has had to train ever since he was basically a baby in how to best use his powers so that he doesn't just destroy everything when he, says words. In fact, he even grew up in isolation because of the destructive force of his powers. He can use his powers to fly, create powerful energy fields around himself, produce concussive blasts, bolster his physical strength and power, and he also possesses the power of telepathy and a strong telepathic defense. This is one of the main ways that Black Bolt actually communicates, as even a whisper could cause massive harm to those around him. Also, when it comes to that tuning fork I was talking about, it's also super cute because Lockjaw, who is basically his dog, who also should have gotten his own point on this list if I had enough time and space, also is a tuning fork. And Lockjaw is awesome. He can teleport all over the place. Number 10. First appearance. Maya Lopez was created by David Mack and Joe Quesada. She made her first appearance in their run together on Daredevil, the second volume from 1998. Maya first appears as Echo in issue number 9 of that series. Here we learn that she is Wilson Fisk's ward, a talented pianist and a gifted boxer, all because of one very important skill set that she has. Maya has a gift for learning new things and improving on her own established physical skills as well. And we also learn in this first issue that Kingpin has a need for her, and that it appears he plans on using her in a plot to destroy his nemesis, Daredevil. I mean, this is still a Daredevil comic after all, so obviously we gotta get to Daredevil at some point. It's not an Echo comic. Sadly, I think Echo should have her own comic if she hasn't already. That would be cool. Number 9. Heritage. Maya Lopez's background is Native American. She is a member of the Cheyenne Nation. I think it's cool to acknowledge a character's heritage, especially in a character as diverse, complex, and badass as Maya Lopez, and one where it does tend to come up a lot in terms of her own stories in the world. As a child, Maya's father, William Lincoln, who also went by the name Crazy Crazy Horse was killed, and so she ended up in the care of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, who was her father's boss and also his good friend. She became his ward, and he made sure that she was looked after, also sending her to the best and most prestigious schools, seeing the potential in her and acknowledging how talented she was. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn even more about Maya Lopez, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Honestly, I could probably do a part 2. I don't know if I could do a part 2 to this, but I could definitely try. There's a few facts I still haven't mentioned, so. Number 8. Death. Speaking of other interesting facts when it comes to Echo, she is also a character who, like Daredevil, lives with a disability. Maya Lopez was born deaf and has been all of her life. Despite being born deaf though, she often is shown speaking clearly in the comics as opposed to in the MCU, where we can see a young Maya preferring to sign whenever she can. In the comics, we don't know how she sounds when she speaks because, I mean, we're reading, but she doesn't seem to have much trouble communicating verbally with any other character that she talks to. Maya is also capable of effectively reading lips. As such, many of her earlier appearances simply had her doing that and then talking with those she interacted with as opposed to signing. Something that I like about the show is they do show, you know, the challenges of trying to read lips, because it's not easy, and yet in the comics it's just kind of like, she reads lips. It's not really an issue, at least to begin with. Now of course, she also has the power of telepathy, so she doesn't really need to do either of these things, so she can just speak with you in your mind. But we'll expand on that development more in another point. Number 7. The bloody handprint. Something you may have noticed in the series, and something that happens in the comics as well, is the bloody handprint that's left on Maya's face. In the comics, Maya often wears a painted handprint on her face to remember her father by. This is part of her look when she is out as Echo. So although you might not notice her sporting this handprint like in her civilian clothes, you'll undoubtedly see it at some point whenever Maya is out fighting other characters as either a hero or a misguided villain. This is because when her father died, he left a bloody handprint on her, something that would remain when it came to her final memories of him. In fact, this is also part of her costume for a one-woman dance and theatrical show in the comics that she writes and performs herself, titled Echo. In the show, Maya remembers that moment as a devil killing a tribal shaman for his shadow. But before the shaman dies, he leaves his mark on the littlest brave. She also wears the painted handprint on her face for this performance. Obviously, it's an indication of how important her dad was to her, so hence why you will see her sometimes with a handprint on her face. Number 6. Daredevil. Maya became a pawn to be used in one of Kingpin's many plots to destroy Daredevil. Knowing Daredevil's true identity as Matt Murdock, Wilson arranged it so that the two would meet, hoping for them, of course, to start a romance, which they did. Kingpin then made Echo believe that Daredevil was the one behind the murder of her father. She went after Daredevil and attacked him, but with her face left uncovered as she fought, Matt recognized her. He revealed his identity to her and insisted it was impossible for him as Daredevil to have killed her father, because at that time, he would have also been a child, like she was. It was then that Echo realized the truth about her father's death, but it's also implied that she probably knew the truth of it all along, but was in denial, which is really sad. Number 5. Death of her father. While Maya didn't know it at the time, Wilson Fisk was also the person behind her father's murder, at least in the comics. While Fisk didn't get his own hands dirty, he did give the order to kill Maya's father, who, as we said before, worked for Fisk as muscle. When Echo later learned of Fisk's involvement in her father's death, this further complicated matters for her. Fisk, of course, had been like a father figure to her over the years since her father had died, but was also the one responsible for killing her own dad. You can see how upsetting and confusing that might be for Maya, or for anyone for that matter. It's just not great. Number 4. Blinded Kingpin. While Kingpin raised her as his own, this wasn't enough to protect him from Maya's wrath. Ultimately, she turned on him after realizing that he had lied to her and manipulated her. He had made her believe that Daredevil was the one behind her father's death when ultimately he was. Maya's dad was betrayed by Fisk, who thought that he was getting too crazy and thus becoming a liability. Maya shot Kingpin right in the face for revenge, and although he managed to miraculously survive this, he was left temporarily blind. I say temporarily because of course he would regain his sight later on, because comics. Number 3. Ronin. Well, in the live-action series Hawkeye, we see Maya and her crew were victims of Clint Barton's Ronin. In the comics, Maya herself once became Ronin. She was actually the person to take up the mantle, I believe, following Clint. Ronin in the MCU was responsible for the death of people that she loved, which explains why she seems to be hot on the trail of anyone connected to that mantle. In the comics, Daredevil was the one to recommend Maya as Ronin for the New Avengers team. She would end up attempting to help the New Avengers in their infiltration of organized criminal enterprises working to acquire valuable intel for the team. From chasing Ronin to being Ronin. Or from being Ronin to chasing Ronin, I guess I should say, since comics came first. Number 2. Eidetic memory and photographic reflexes. Similar to Tony Master's Taskmaster, Echo also possesses a unique skill set. She can replicate any physical action that she sees, including various fighting skills or styles, or other skills such as playing instruments. This makes her a deadly enemy to face and is also part of why she was so successful in her first fight against Daredevil. To prepare for that fight, Maya watched videos of confrontations between DD and his nemesis Bullseye. So in part she got some of her moves and fighting style from Bullseye himself, who is known for being pretty unstoppable for just being a guy, and is also known for his deadly accuracy. Although I guess I should make it known that, Maya can only do as much as she can do physically, so she can learn lots of different styles, but she tends to stick to things that fit more to like her body type and her build. Number 1. The new Phoenix. We all know the Phoenix Force, an extremely cosmic and all-powerful entity that is more intrinsically associated and tied to Jean Grey in her own family tree. In fact, the Phoenix Force in general tends to be more tied to the world of X-Men and mutant kind, at least as far as we'd seen thus far. More recently in the comics there was a tournament where heroes competed to determine who would be the new host of the Phoenix Force. If you wonder who hosted this tournament, it was none other than the Phoenix Force itself, who had returned to Earth. Among those involved in the contest were Black Panther, Captain America, She-Hulk, Doctor Doom, Luke Cage, Howard the Duck even, Namor, Shang-Chi, Hyperion, and Wolverine. In the end, however, Echo was chosen as the winner and the new Phoenix. She bonded with the Phoenix Force and became known as Phoenix. In fact, when the 2021 Heroes Reborn event happened, Maya actually suspected that she may have accidentally caused this with her newfound power. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, though it's a fair concern for her to have, given how unruly and powerful the Phoenix Force is known to be, and how it also has a tendency to corrupt people. Number 10. Egyptian Pantheon. Khonshu hails from the Egyptian pantheon of gods, which is a large group of deities who in actual history were worshipped by various groups who each had their own kind of symbolism and their own take on each respective god or goddess, which means that Egyptian deities have some of the most diverse wheelhouses when it comes to what they symbolize. The Egyptian pantheon in Marvel Comics descended from another group of godlike beings known as the Elder Gods. Khonshu himself is possibly descended even from the Elder God that basically began it all when it comes to this pantheon, giving birth to one of the oldest Egyptian gods who Khonshu himself is related to. Number 9. God of the Moon. Probably one of the facts you already know, but also one of the facts that is still the most important to know, I'd say, is that Khonshu is the God of the Moon. Many of us at this point know this, but what does that actually mean, to be the God of the Moon? In Egyptian, the name Khonshu actually also means traveler, and it's believed that the meaning behind this name is not necessarily in regards to like travelers of the night and their protection, but possibly to symbolize the traveling of the moon across the nighttime sky. At least, that's what the moon appears to do. Over at Marvel Comics though, Khonshu instead is depicted as the god of the moon and the protector of those who travel in the night. Though in regards to his connection to the movement of the nighttime sky, his MCU ability to manipulate it kinda makes a lot of sense, just based on that original meaning. That original interpretation we think of what traveler could mean. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show us that you love us, head on over to Facebook and click that like, click that follow. It really does help us out here at the channel, so thank you. Also, we're gonna have some real exciting things coming your way over there, I promise. You're gonna want to be there for it. It's gonna be juicy. Number 8. Celestial Heliopolis. In the comics, Khonshu and the rest of the Egyptian deities are said to have resided in their own dimension, adjacent to Earth, much like the Norse mythological deities of Asgard. Previous to residing on Celestial Heliopolis, it's believed that they actually lived and ruled on Earth in Heliopolis, until the human pharaohs took their place, and then they moved instead to Celestial Heliopolis, their own dimension. Also, like Asgard, Celestial Heliopolis has its own bridge to the earthly realm, but instead of being a rainbow bridge, known as the Bifrost, that's what the Asgardians call theirs, it is a golden bridge and is known as the Path of Gods. I like that. The Path of Gods. Number 7. Can't enter Earth. Not technically anyways. Have you ever wondered why all-powerful Egyptian gods like Khonshu even need an avatar? Well, it's because they can't actually physically be on Earth, and so they have avatars to kind of like act out their will for them and to connect them to Earth. This is what Mark Spector is for Moon Knight, a vessel, a fist, an avatar. He is able to fight the fights on Earth that Khonshu can't physically deal with himself. I believe this is because the Egyptian gods are really all on celestial Heliopolis, where they live, but that doesn't mean that they can't reach out to Earth to spiritually connect and communicate with their avatars. That is something they can still do. At least, Khonshu was able to do it before he tried to take over the world, but more on that point later. Number 6. God of Vengeance. Earlier depictions of Khonshu in mythology are said to have seen him depicted as bloody and violent. At one point in a pyramid text known as the Cannibal Hymn, he was plotting to kill the other gods and devour them to absorb their power. Yeesh! But aside from that, there isn't a lot that he has to do with violence or revenge. In fact, Horus is more traditionally known for being a god of vengeance among the Egyptian deities, as his father was killed by Set and Horus was usurped by him. However, over at Marvel Comics, it seems some of that very distant, very small amount of reference to Khonshu being bloodthirsty, power-hungry, and somehow even vengeful has trickled into the character. I assume the vengeance is more there to make the bloodthirsty and violent aspects of him feel more justified though. I don't think they were necessarily like, yes, revenge, it's a thing that's in mythology for this character. They were just like, look, Moon Knight's gonna be kind of a violent guy, and how do we justify that? Number 5. Son of Ra. Or adopted son of Ra? Honestly, it's a little confusing. In the Marvel Handbook, it was stated that Khonshu was the son of Adam, aka Amun-Ra, Egyptian god of the sun, and Amenet, air goddess. However, it was later claimed during the 2016 Moon Knight series that Khonshu was the adopted son of Amun-Ra. Either way you look at it though, these two are related, either by blood or in name or title to one another. Also, to be clear, in Egyptian mythology, those are two different gods. So there's Amun-Ra, and then there's Ra, and those are two different beings entirely, but Amun-Ra is kind of like a combination in Marvel Comics of both of them. Ra and Khonshu, each representing different life-governing and powerful orbs, the sun and the moon, have also been known to have an ongoing feud, each having their own avatar fight against the other. It has been said that throughout history, Khonshu was always the one to prevail in this ongoing war between father and son, with their avatars always coming out victorious. Number 4. Age of Khonshu. Right? Remember when I said that Khonshu can't even really enter Earth in almost any facet? Well, this is because he is currently locked up in the dungeon of Asgard. Why is he locked up in the dungeon of Asgard? Because he kind of attempted to take over the world and turn it into his own Egyptian afterlife. Yeah, not a great look, Khonshu. Now granted, just because Khonshu tried to do that and almost succeeded in doing that awful thing, doesn't mean he's a straight up villain. Khonshu's history in comics is filled with both a lot of good and some bad deeds, this being one of the worst. But prior to him trying to take over the world, the mission he set Moon Knight on was actually seemingly a pretty good one, to defeat Mephisto, who was pretty much always a villain through and through. After this was done though, Khonshu revealed his plan to take Mephisto's place and rule Earth, transforming it into an Egyptian underworld, and well, yeah, now he's in prison, meaning that his connection to Earth is even more severed than it was previously. So now he really can't be there. Can't be there at all. Number 3. Sibling of Bast. Because Bast is also said to be the child of Atum, it's therefore implied that Bast and Khonshu are basically siblings, with Khonshu either being a half-brother or full brother depending on who Bast's mother was. Bast is an extremely important deity when it comes to the history and the lore of the nation of Wakanda, so this is a pretty wild relationship that we can use to possibly connect the two in the MCU at some point. While Bast has not shown up in Moon Knight as of episode 3, which is where we're at currently with Moon Knight in terms of the time of this recording, it's possible that even in the MCU the two will be related, and this will be revealed at a later date. Bast is the child of Adam, but claims to have started as a human who ascended to divinity through the power of worship. Bast is known for being a cat god or goddess, depending on their form at the time, and is also known for being connected to the underworld, specifically Necropolis, at one point taking T'Challa, aka Black Panther, for their king. Number 2. Elder Shadow. Null referred to Khonshu as an Elder Shadow during the King in Black event, event, not specifically calling him such, but merely discussing the term, and while doing so, on that page were other important figures from Marvel Comics. Included among them was Khonshu, implying that, according to Null, Khonshu is also an Elder Shadow, also dressed in local legend. The other beings who join him on the page are Shumagarath, Sidorak, and like I said, Khonshu is also there too. Two of these beings we know are in the MCU, with Shumagarath being renamed to Gargantos for the Multiverse of Madness. Does this mean that Sidorak could also appear in the MCU, and perhaps Null might as well? It just seems like an interesting thing to note, at least, and could hint to the arrival of these other characters, especially as this all went down in the King in Black Black Knight one-shot, another character who has already appeared in the MCU in Eternals in his human form of Dane Whitman. An Elder Shadow, I believe, is like a dark entity that is perhaps like far older and more powerful than it inherently seems. At least that's my interpretation. I don't think it's ever been fully defined, but that's what I'm going with based on what Null says on that page. A lot of people, when I talked about that in my short, were like, what is an Elder Shadow? What is? We don't really know, but it sounds not great. Number 1. God of Time. Khonshu isn't just known for being the god of the moon and of vengeance over at Marvel Comics, he's also known for being one of the gods of time. Once again, this makes his ability to turn back the night sky to age-old constellations and star positions even more logical, as this is not just a manipulation of the night sky, but it's kind of also a manipulation of time. Even in Egyptian mythology, Khonshu is associated with time as well. In Marvel mythos, Khonshu is the protector of travelers through the night and through time. And this could even potentially connect his MCU counterpart to the going-ons of Multiverse of Madness, Loki's Time Variance Authority, the TVA, and even Kang, who is known for his time travel plots and shenanigans in the comics.
Number 10. Bit by the same spider as Spider-Man. Cindy Moon's first appearance in the comics was actually as a cameo in issue 1 of the 2014 Amazing Spider-Man reboot. In that comic, we see the events that lead to Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man. A spider gets caught in a particle accelerator and becomes heavily irradiated, and then it goes on to bite Peter Parker. But after the spider drops off Peter, it crawls along the floor before climbing onto and biting the ankle of a random girl who also happened to be there as well. This girl was Cindy Moon. Just like Peter Parker, Cindy Moon gained amazing spider-related abilities thanks to her spider bite, and while this would make for an interesting villain origin, thankfully it gave us something way better. The character who would go on to become the hero Silk. Nice. Number 9. Ezekiel Sims. When Silk's power first emerged, it was in the form of accidentally webbing up her parents. Obviously, someone spontaneously emitting super strong spider webs out of their fingertips and webbing you up, likely while screaming their head off because they don't know what's happening, would be quite the terrifying experience. It got the attention of a man known as Ezekiel Sims, who came and took Cindy Moon away and began training her in how to use her powers for good. He was a mentor and father figure for her while she was with him, and after he discovered that an extremely powerful villain was tracking her, he and Cindy agreed that she should be hidden away. That's what they did, locking Cindy in an underground bunker with everything she would need. It wasn't an imprisonment. She knew the code to get out and could leave, but she knew the consequences of leaving, and so she did not. Number 8. Better spider sense. Silk possesses an extrasensory hyper danger or silk sense, which warns her of potential immediate danger and links with her superhuman kinesthetics, enabling her to evade most any injuries, unless she cognitively overrides her automatic reflexes. Her silk sense is more advanced than the spider sense of Spider-Man and other spider totems. It allows her to react significantly faster in combat for starters, but it also has superior range and can even sense the identity of an attacker before a fight begins. There is a side effect though. Her hyper silk sense seems to be a bit out of whack. For example, Silk was alerted one night when a girl was left by her friends after a party and was crying. Not a danger or anything, just a not great moment for somebody else. Her sense has also continuously fired off when there seemed to be no immediate danger, making it very sensitive to the point where she will ignore it even when she is in direct danger, which can obviously be pretty bad. Number 7. Webbing out of her fingers? Unlike Peter Parker, at least the 616 version of Peter Parker, Silk has the ability to organically produce her own silk webbing. This kind of gross idea is possibly limited by her body's health and nutrition, meaning she's gotta keep well fed and all that that jazz. These organic webs have many of the same properties as Spider-Man's artificial webbing, but can also be woven into clothing, like her first ever spider suit, which is literally just her covering herself in her own webbing. The really unique thing about Silk's spider webbing is that she releases it through her fingertips, which makes for some different uses than we may be used to. For example, she's even used this webbing to make claws that she can use in combat. I don't know how that actually works, but it's certainly interesting and pretty cool, actually. Number 6, eidetic memory. Another natural ability Cindy Moon has possessed since childhood is an eidetic memory, which was a reason her parents always wanted her to focus on school and her studies. She's always been a bit more of a romantic instead. Eidetic memory is the ability to see an object soon after you look away, very similar to a photographic memory, which is being able to recall those images months later. For most people, the image lasts mere seconds, or less than 1 second, but can last longer on more rare occasions, like if you're a superhero, most likely. To get an idea of how well your brain makes use of eidetic memory, look at an object and close your eyes, and see how long you can still see the object in your mind's eye. Now I have involved you, and we shared this moment together. Isn't that just the sweetest? So nice. Number 5, steamy primal attraction. As Peter Parker and Cindy Moon were bitten by the same spider, something kinda spicy occurred in their bodies that makes them both emit pheromones that makes it extremely difficult for these two spider heroes to keep their hands off of each other. Like when they first met, they extremely spontaneously just started going at it, so much so that it rolled over into the next issue of the comic. On rooftops, on the ceiling, just all over, even embarrassingly interrupting Anna, who Peter shares an apartment with. Get it together, people, come on, good lordy. They're just naturally extremely drawn to each other. It's not entirely their fault. A handy side effect of their shared connection is that it even allows Cindy to be able to sense Peter across the multiverse, as she stated during the Into the Spider-Verse event. It's also revealed no other multiversal Peters share this pheromone, so 'tis strictly a 616 thing. Useful information for us, I'm sure. Number 4, tracked by more Lun. I said before that Ezekiel Sims and Cindy Moon agreed to have her locked away in a room that blocked detection from an extremely powerful villain at the bottom of his tower. This villain that was tracking Cindy Moon was none other than the totem-devouring Morlun and his inheritors. It was one of the first things her and Peter talked about once he opened the room containing Cindy Moon, as she flipped on him thinking that her release would attract Morlun. Luckily, Peter had taken Morlun's life twice before this, but obviously that means Morlun has the means to return, which he obviously does. It turns out that Morlun and the other inheritors could track Cindy because she was the avatar of a powerful spider totem called the Bride, which actually played an integral part of the huge multiversal Spider-Verse event from 2014. And if you haven't checked out that story, what are you doing here? Get to it, nerd! Number 3, finding her family. One of the first things Cindy Moon did after being discovered by Peter Parker was swing off to the place where she used to live with her family before being taken in by Ezekiel Sims. Unfortunately, when she got there, it turns out her family wasn't there anymore, and another family was now living there in their place. Her missing family was and is a big part of her character, as she understandably dedicates herself to finding her family when she isn't fighting crime or getting steamy with Peter Parker. She joined up with the Fact channel, run by J. Jonah Jameson, as a reporter with the added benefit of having more power to gather information about her parents' whereabouts. After the events of Spider-Verse, she soon found that her parents' record had been erased, but she kept gathering clues to their whereabouts anyways, even going back to her old bunker where she created an evidence board. After some battles with Black Cat, she was kidnapped by the Repairman, who revealed that he worked for the people who had her family, but Black Cat stopped him from being able to give Cindy any more info, which kinda sucks. It wasn't until the incursions that Jameson was able to give her information about one member of her family. Number 2, her brother. During the final incursion, Cindy received information from J. Jonah Jameson about a man named James Park, who was involved with the Goblin Nation and was suspected to be Cindy's lost long brother, Albert Moon. She went off to find him, but however, due to the incursion, she had to save people from getting de-lifed and injured instead, cutting her time even shorter. She rushed to the hospital and discovered her brother in room 407 and hugged him in a teary goodbye as Earth 616 and Earth 1610 collided, ending them and everyone else in both universes. Luckily, in all new, all different Marvel, they are brought back and can re-meet, allowing them to build the relationship again and even move in together while Albert is in college, and then go on to help each other finding their parents, which is nice. Number 1. New Agents of Atlas. Jimmy Woo offered Cindy Moon membership to his New Agents of Atlas when the War of the Realms struck Earth. The Atlas Foundation, if you don't know, is one of the most inscrutable, pervasive, and enduring secret societies on Earth, and traditionally pursued world domination, but no longer. Currently, the Atlas Foundation, led by Jimmy Woo, a descendant of Genghis Khan, used its covert power and influence for humanity's greater good. Yay. During the War of the Realms, Cindy joined with Braun to help in Seoul, South Korea. After Syndra's forces took Korea, Cindy went undercover as a local Korean and found a way to disguise Amadeus Cho as a Muspelheim soldier to free the captive Luna Snow. They used the Black Bifrost to travel to northern China where they were trained by Shang-Chi. They went on to try and fight for what was right, and it's all really awesome and mystical stuff. Dragons and corporations. A cool addition to the War of Realms, but yeah, Cindy became part of this awesome team.
At number 10 are the total personality resets that take place to both turn Tony Stark inverted and to turn him back to normal. The first inversion happens in 2015's Avengers and X-Men's Axis number 9 when a magical spell changes Tony Stark's personality and turns him into a darker version of himself, which then becomes Superior Iron Man. He has all his worst traits brought to the forefront and acts on all of them basically right away. The other personality change that takes place comes right after Superior Iron Man's story ends. This version of the character only really gets 9 issues before he's turned back to normal in the Secret Wars storyline. And although, spoiler alert, he seems to die at the end of the 9-issue run, this is still an unusually abrupt shift that takes place with Tony Stark appearing as normal again in Secret Wars. This may be a sign that the writers had some issues finding a way to transition Iron Man out of this phase, but although it does make sense that this might be a tough thing to do properly, the way he kinda just goes back to normal after everything he did in those 9 issues, it's a little jarring. At number 9 is that Superior Iron Man makes serious efforts to purchase a media conglomerate. After selling a dangerous weapon to international buyers and making billions of dollars, he decides that his next move will be to try and control how the public views him. Although the deal doesn't actually go through, this effort just shows how different this version of Tony Stark is from the one we're used to. He's still just as smart, but he's more willing to take major risks and hurt people in the process. He's so driven to make this purchase go through that he actually offers double what the company is worth to ensure that he can carry out his plans. And if he had gotten control of the media empire, his ultimate plan would probably have gone through in the end. Already having control over the masses using the extremist virus, imagine how airtight his plan would be if he also had their opinions in the palm of his hand. Luckily, the plan doesn't go through, but it's close. And that is one of the things that makes this version of Tony Stark so terrifying. He's still a relatively personable character who's good at masking his intentions. So him trying to make this purchase and getting so close to actually closing the deal shows how quickly people are ready to allow a dangerous criminal to carry out his evil plans. At number 8 is the fact that Superior Iron Man releases a popular free app to the public, which actually turns out to be a virus called the Extremis 3.0. Tony Stark's first move after his personality is inverted is that he moves to San Francisco and develops an app that he then uses to try and control the masses. The app itself is so powerful and addictive that it becomes one of the most popular apps in the world very fast, with the app starting as a free service and the effects being that it offers people beauty, intelligence, and good health. It's no wonder why it gets so popular so fast. But the catch is that the app is only free for the first day, before you're obligated to pay $100 a day to keep it going. This is speculated to be a metaphor for modern mobile phone technology and the way that the public gets obsessed with it. It may even be a metaphor for the evils behind some social media developers not having the foresight to see the detrimental effects their technology has on its users. At number 7 is that Superior Iron Man actually turns Alcatraz into his own evil lair. After Tony Stark moves to the West Coast, the app isn't the only thing he creates to get himself more power in the city. He also makes the decision that he wants to settle down and buy some property to help strike up business with other investors. But This version of Stark decides it's more his style to buy a place that's right out in the open. So out in the open that it actually takes up a whole island, Alcatraz Island. And if you're not familiar with what Alcatraz Island is, it's right off the coast of San Francisco in complete view of everyone living in the city. And Stark doesn't keep his new structure humble or hidden by any means at all. He builds an enormous secret lair that he calls Stark Island, sort of like a classic evil lair that a villain from a James Bond movie would work out of. And although it's all done legally as far as we can tell, this is just another example of Superior Iron Man's grandiosity and arrogance as a villain. At number 6 is that Superior Iron Man develops a whole new armor called the Endo Sim Armor Model 50. If you know about this suit of armor, you know that it's considered one of the most powerful out of all Iron Man's suits. The main property that sets this suit apart from the others is that it's made of a symbiotic material, or at least draws from the physiology of a symbiote. This means that Tony Stark can summon the armor from wherever he is, and it will crawl or float over to him and cover his body. It then hardens around him, becoming stronger than steel and arguably stronger than the original Iron Man suit. And just like a symbiote, it has properties that makes it seem like it's alive. So with a suit that's even more alive than the HUD and AI assisted original armor, it's also able to match his senses and support his each and every move without needing much verbal communication. For example, the suit actually turns red when Tony Stark gets angry, which is a pretty awesome feature actually. Even though it's basically just an aesthetic function, it proves that the armor is a living thing, which somehow makes Superior Iron Man even more intimidating than he already was. At number 5 is that Superior Iron Man starts drinking again. Normally, Tony Stark has a natural tendency towards drinking, and so he's put up some pretty serious boundaries in the past against the habit. But when his personality is inverted, Tony Stark naturally becomes more of a drinker than ever before, except with a more positive and relaxed approach to the activity. To be fair to the original Stark though, Superior Iron Man is only able to do this because of Extremis 3.0. Using the technology to keep himself healthy and relatively unaffected in any negative way by his drinking, Stark is able to indulge all he wants without issue. And in my view, this is yet another strange trait of this inverted Tony Stark, which shows another unlikable side of the former good guy. Something about him indulging in a gluttonous, unregulated lifestyle rubs me the wrong way, probably because the typical Tony, despite his issues, is able to regulate his habits and use self-control to keep himself in line, whereas Superior Iron Man is just letting loose. And although drinking surely isn't a crime, it's just an example showing that this Tony Stark isn't about to practice any self-control anytime soon, at least during this storyline. At number 4 is that Superior Iron Man actually erases Matt Murdock's memory. One of Superior Iron Man's first threats in the series is none other than Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, and it's because Murdock starts to realize the harmful effects of Extremis 3.0 and decides to investigate. During this time, Daredevil occupies San Francisco as well, so this issue is all around him at all times during this storyline, and he has a hard time not noticing it. But what he finds even more disturbing is that Stark has actually been forcing the virus into people without their consent, and he's doing this through the water supply. So Daredevil does all he can think to do and fights Tony before threatening to tell everyone unless Stark stops what he's up to. But this is a big mistake because Stark instead immobilizes Murdock with his Endosim armor and wipes his memory from the last few days. And although this is a very petty move, it does work and pretty much neutralizes Murdock's motives to take down Stark's plans. If you know the comics, you know that mind wiping is known as a pretty awful thing to do to someone, even for the worst villains. So this is a pretty nasty move by this version of Stark, who isn't even yet showing his worst side here. At number 3 is the Iron Sight program that Superior Iron Man puts in place in the city of San Francisco. When his own app coerces people into spending ridiculous sums of money per day, they start to resort to violence and other crimes to afford the service. And instead of discontinuing his app for the greater good of society, he instead develops a whole program to monitor and control the masses that he calls the Iron Sight program, which is basically a giant fleet of drones flying around San Francisco, watching people and ensuring that they're all staying in line. This would include keeping crimes down, but also monitoring internet searches and other intrusive initiatives like that. It gets to the point where basically anyone with a device finds themselves constantly accompanied by an Iron Sight drone wherever they are. This shows another side to Superior Iron Man and the lengths he will go to have complete control and total autonomous power over the people of San Francisco. At number 2 is that Superior Iron Man actually restores Daredevil's vision. After he's confronted about the evil motivations behind the Extremis virus, Tony Stark decides he wants to show off the power of the virus to convince Daredevil of its efficacy. But he does it in a really vindictive and manipulative way. Daredevil accuses him of playing God, so Stark responds by saying that he's actually just playing human, and uses the virus to restore Matt Murdock's sight. This understandably overwhelms the typically blind hero and shows how much power Stark has actually amassed since being inverted during the Axis storyline. But this way of displaying his power is pretty shocking and arguably pretty cruel as well, especially considering Daredevil's sight is once again taken away once the effects of the virus wear off. The normal Tony Stark would never have shown off his power in this way. Well, he also wouldn't have developed such a dangerous and nefarious technology in the first place. But still, this act is pretty wild and something that people often overlook the significance of. At number 1 is that Superior Iron Man actually fights Captain America. This fight is definitely more well known in the context of top Superior Iron Man facts, but it's important to mention and put right at the top of the list because those who don't know about this battle need to know how crazy it was. Because this fight is arguably even more epic than when the two fight during the Civil War storyline. All of the buildup of Superior Iron Man becoming evil comes to an epic climax in issue 44 of Avengers, which is when this event takes place. It's also, spoiler alert, the last issue that we see Superior Iron Man in, because he actually dies at the end of the battle. Although Captain America doesn't really take the win either, they both die in a helicarrier crash. But as sad as that is, this is probably the only way Superior Iron Man's reign could have come to an end, with the only other person who knows Tony Stark as well as he knows himself taking him down for good. It's hard to say if without this intervention that Superior Iron Man would have ever concluded his tyrannical tirade, but it's good that Cap stepped in to put a stop to it just in case, thus capping off the short run of Superior Iron Man as a fun and suspense-filled storyline.
Number 10, Offspring of Carnage. I mean, this one is right in the title, but it's still really important to note that Toxin is the child of Carnage. But what does this mean? Why is it significant? Well, when it comes to Carnage being the offspring of Venom, it was a symbiote that was inherently more powerful than its sire. So you can imagine that if that is the way it went before, that is the way it's gonna go this time. Toxin is even more powerful than both Carnage and Venom as the grandbaby of Venom. Hence why this symbiote caused such a stir in the symbiotic world when it first appeared, especially when it came to the concerns of both Toxin's parent and their grandparent. Number 9, Patrick Mulligan. Patrick Mulligan was Toxin's first host and was a police officer. With Patrick, Toxin was on a journey to learn what it meant to be a hero and attempted to walk in Mulligan's footsteps, doing their best to walk the walk and talk the talk of being a true hero, despite having a secret darkness lurking within them that Toxin often had to fight against. Patrick unfortunately would be killed by Blackheart, the son of Mephisto, which was pretty bad news for Toxin. Toxin was then used by Blackheart to create his own symbiote warriors, and Blackheart took a chunk of the symbiote for himself as a sacrifice to be used in a ritual. Ouch. And friends, if you are loving this channel and this list, be sure to show your support for us over on Facebook, where you can also like and follow us. Yay! Number 8, Wanted Dead, Not Alive. The crazy thing about Toxin is just everything this poor symbiote has been through. It's more complex than other symbiotes due to it being the offspring of major sadistic villain Carnage, but still closely related to the now anti-hero, possibly full-on hero at this point, Venom. Which of course means that even to begin with, life was very much not smooth sailing for the symbiote. In the beginning, Toxin was actually actively hunted down by both Carnage and Venom, each symbiote wanting to destroy it for their own reasons. Carnage was basically worried about Toxin usurping it in regards to its evil ways and in regards to it being more powerful. Venom was worried about the symbiote's alignment with it being the child of Carnage and wanted to destroy it to avoid it becoming an even more deadly enemy. So almost as soon as it came into existence, Toxin was fighting simply to survive. Number 7, Eddie Brock. Even though Eddie is more well known for being the host of Venom, Toxin's grandparent, Eddie was also at one point bonded with the Toxin symbiote as well. Is that weird? weird? Probably. Especially considering the two were forced to team up, and this was also a time when Eddie was terrified of symbiotes, and then they actually fought against the Venom symbiote together. Initially, they each had their vendetta against the new Venom, Agent Venom, aka Flash Thompson, but ultimately they were both dissuaded from following through with their plan to attack and kill Venom. Instead, the two teamed up and decided to accept their newfound bond. Eddie with Toxin decided to return to his more lethal protector approach, becoming an anti-hero once more alongside Toxin. Number 6. Suppressed. Not only did Toxin come into the world with both Carnage and Venom teaming up to try and kill it, but then the symbiote also later experienced a pretty traumatic time when it was suppressed using drugs, which basically just made it like a passenger going along for the ride with host Eddie Brock. This happened as a result of Eddie getting taken in by the FBI, who decided to expose the symbiote to inhibitor drugs, which suppressed its own voice and consciousness in Eddie's mind. Toxin truly has had a pretty toxic upbringing, if you ask me. Could you imagine existing in a body without any control or influence over what it did? Sounds horrifying. Although I guess maybe this is kind of like some weird revenge, because technically I think Toxin did that to Eddie in the beginning. I guess we can only hope that Eddie and Toxin's will and desires were similar at this point in time. Number 5. Agender. Although we used the term son in the title of this list, and I've said it before, and although Toxin is sometimes referred to as the son of Carnage, which is also why we use that term, Toxin is really neither son nor daughter. All symbiotes are considered agender, meaning they don't really have genders. Some choose to present more masculine or more feminine, and others choose to present more neutral, but Toxin and other symbiotes from Clintar don't really come with genders, and they reproduce asexually, all on their own. Although they do sometimes get some outside help when it comes to birthing new symbiotes, which the Venom symbiote received at one point from Eddie Brock, who remained bonded to it during a birth to kinda like support it. Sometimes symbiotes have been prone to use words like daddy, and some even seem more drawn towards certain genders when it comes to the host that they choose, but technically they don't have genders themselves, and are more gender fluid, usually when it comes to their presentation. Symbiotes being both agender and able to asexually reproduce also means though that at any point past their maturity, Toxin could basically produce an offspring all of their own that would likely be even more powerful even than Toxin, which I don't know what that symbiote is like, but I don't know if I want to meet that symbiote. Sounds insane. Number 4. Jubilile Van Scotter. Jubilile is the third host of Toxin. Toxin was passed on to her in the fight against Chthon, and before that she had her own symbiote and had also gained the Ray's symbiote as well. They were all together when they bonded to her. Jubilile's father passed away when she was a child, and a few years later she decided to set out and explore the world in his memory, as her father had been an experienced sailor who had taught her how to sail himself. She ran into Carnage, and a ritual he performed on her left her transformed, although not in the way he'd hoped. Instead of becoming his minion, she became empowered after being infected by a Darkhold augmented version of something similar to the Carnage symbiote, and which also tied her to Carnage and the villain's memories. Her connection to the Darkhold and the power of the symbiotes allowed Scotter to defeat Chthon, but seemingly at the risk of the lives of the symbiotes that she wielded. Seemingly anyways. Number 3. Many seeming deaths of Toxin. So many deaths. Toxin has seemingly died on more than one occasion, with the symbiote being set on fire twice and being suspected dead during at least one of those instances, back when Toxin was bonded with Eddie Brock and the two fought against Venom, who was bonded with Flash Thompson at the time. However, it turned out that Toxin survived on both occasions due to being so powerful and so durable. Later on, Toxin would be believed dead for a few years after facing Chthon, along with another unnamed symbiote and the Ray symbiote. However, it turned out it survived this battle as Toxin reappeared during the King in Black event. Number 2. Current host. Currently, Toxin is bonded with Bren Waters. Bren and Toxin met at some point after Toxin's supposed death following the defeat of Chthon. The two decided to team up together, with Bren, a teenager, requesting that Toxin give them a more adult appearance, which makes sense if you're fighting crime. Toxin obliged, and so when fighting together, they look more like Patrick Mulligan or Eddie Brock rock in regards to their overall intimidating, muscle-bound stature. We met Bren during the King in Black event, where we witnessed him and Toxin going out only to be accused of being part of the symbiote invasion by one of Alchemax's guardsmen, who they got into a fight with. The guardsman, it turned out, was actually Bren's father, Oscar, who apparently does not approve of symbiotes. Number 1. Most powerful symbiote, or at least almost the most powerful symbiote. Aside from Null maybe, or just the King in Black in general, I think Null is in a league all of their own, and then it's basically between, for me, Toxin and Anti-Venom. But this is Toxin's list, so I think we can give them the most powerful title, at least here, where they're alone on their list. Toxin is considered to be so powerful because of its heritage. Toxin is the child of Carnage, which is already an insanely powerful symbiote in terms of what it can do, and in terms of its resistance to standard weaknesses, such as sonics and fire. Toxin is super strong, agile, fast, durable, possesses superior stamina, has its own more efficient and specific version of Spider Sense, can shapeshift, camouflage, heal itself, crawl on walls, create webs, is a skill tracker, and has a toxic bite, after bonding with Eddie anyways. I don't think they had the toxic bite originally.
At number 10, Valkyrie's origins are from ancient Norse mythology. In the earlier Thor comics, there was a running backup feature known as Tales of Asgard, and it told stories from ancient Norse mythology and presented them as part of the official canon. One of these texts was the Volsunga Saga, which is a 13th century Icelandic tale, and it acts as one of the origins for Valkyrie as we know her today. Another one was Nibelungenlied, a High German epic poem that also told some of the origin of the character. And these referential texts aren't entirely fictional either. These stories are largely based on the real-life Merovingian queen Brunhild, who is fabled to have had an affair with Thor, or the mortal incarnation of him at least, a guy named Siegfried. The story ends in a tragedy with everyone dying, but within that tale is where we get the origins of Valkyrie. Also, the saying, "It's not over till the fat lady sings"? Well, the fat lady being referred to comes from an opera by Richard Wagner that was also based on these tales. And the fat lady is based on the same character as Valkyrie. This part isn't official Marvel lore though. Marvel's Valkyrie doesn't sing. At least, I don't think she does. At number 9 is that Valkyrie is actually the only one left out of all the Valkyrior. The Valkyrior, for those who aren't aware, are a group of demigoddesses who send the souls of slain Asgardian warriors to Valhalla. The group usually consists of 9 warriors who ride winged horses and are typically led by Brunhild, aka Valkyrie. But tragically, this fleet of godly warriors is killed in a huge war, while Valkyrie's soul is imprisoned by Amora the Enchantress. So she finds herself coming out of imprisonment entirely alone, and forced to pave her own path. Well, not quite, because Odin does revive the Valkyrior, but only allows them to exist within the walls of Valhalla, which is basically the afterlife. So he doesn't really bring them back to life. Either way, Valkyrie is tasked with finding a new group of Valkyrior after this incident. Although, considering it's probably pretty hard to find 9 more demigoddesses that can also ride winged horses, and the fact that Valkyrie just misses her old friends, she doesn't complete the task. She instead moves on and creates the Fearless Defenders, which is a fully female team of heroes from all corners of the Marvel Universe. At number 8 is that Valkyrie actually has a 6th sense that other Asgardians don't. And this 6th sense is the ability to tell when someone is about to die. As much as Valkyrie may be an unoriginal character along with her other Asgardian counterparts, there are certain features that Marvel adds to make these characters more impactful. And this is one of them. Valkyrie is the only Asgardian who has the power to see what's described as a death glow around anyone that is facing imminent death. The purple aura will appear around anyone who's about to face their end, but Brunhild doesn't get to know how or when their deaths will come. She just knows it's coming soon. She's given this power because as the leader of the Valkyrior, it is her duty to retrieve the fallen soldiers of any war and bring them to Valhalla. So it sort of makes sense that she'd be equipped with a power like this. Sort of bittersweet though, I'm sure it would kind of get old when you're not on the job having to face moral dilemmas on a daily basis, like seeing the death glow around someone on the street and wondering whether or not you should tell them Now watch out for that bus. Oh, purple aura. Should have said something. At number 7 is that Valkyrie's sword is a carved dragon's tooth. Such an extremely skilled fighter like Valkyrie naturally needs a powerful weapon to support her in her combative escapades. Contending valiantly against the likes of Hela, Thor, and Odin himself, this warrior does not mess around, so her weaponry has to be up to par with her own standards. And what's more sacred and durable and powerful than the actual tooth of a dragon, right? This magic, indestructible sword is known as Dragon Fang, for obvious reasons, and it was carved by a primordial sorcerer. But the sword didn't always belong to Valkyrie. Originally, it belonged to the Ancient One, and was then handed down to, still not Valkyrie, but Doctor Strange. And then Doctor Strange handed it off to Valkyrie. I think Strange just realized what the rest of us probably already had figured, which is that there's no one that should wield the sword more fittingly than Val. At number 6 is that Valkyrie's best friend is Hellcat. Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, is a classic Marvel hero first appearing in the comics in 1944. But down the line, she runs into Valkyrie as part of the Defenders in the 1970s. During this time, the two hit it off together and become fast friends, to the point where they actually end up sharing an apartment together later on in the comics. During their friendship, they have fought against Cassiolena and have also been in numerous alliances together. This would include the Defenders, as mentioned before, but also the Fearless Defenders, which is kind of a development of the same team. And that's only when they aren't spending time together outside of work. Would it be called work? Being in superhero alliances to fight evil? Anyway, I think at their level, I feel like it'd be hard to get downtime, so what isn't work at that point? Either way, when they do get time off, they like to spend it together. At number 5 is that Valkyrie used to be a villain, or at least she was cloned and her clone was a villain. But what's bizarre is that Thor actually did this while he was going through a weird time in his life. Can't we all relate? He basically goes nuts from Thor number 460 to 471 and makes an evil Valkyrie who then promptly possesses him. But the way she's created isn't really Thor's fault. After years of stressful events, Thor's mind cracks and the embodiment of his hysteria is an evil Valkyrie who is then made real by accident by Moondragon. This evil incarnation of Valkyrie then controls Thor to do whatever she pleases, including attacking Beta Ray Bill, Sif, Ares, Gamora, and Drax before stealing the power gem. Finally, after all this destruction and betrayal, Moondragon, Doctor Strange, Adam Warlock, and Thanos, of all people, managed to condemn evil Valkyrie back into Thor's mind. Then Odin and Thor take her out for good. Although this appears to be more of a metaphorical apparition representing Thor's mental struggles, there is a time, 11 issues to be exact, when Valkyrie appears quite unusually as a villain to those she normally fights alongside. At number 4 is that Valkyrie actually inhabits more than one human form in the real world. Although Valkyrie is known as being Brunhild in her mortal form, she's actually appeared as 4 other women throughout the comics. The first embodiment she takes on other than Brunhild is Samantha Parrington, when Enchantress copies her essence onto Parrington to take on the Hulk, all against Val's will. The second is Barbara Norris, who has a longer run as Valkyrie's human form. For a decent while in the 70s, Norris simply replaces Brunhild as Valkyrie's mortal form for a while. It's as simple as that. Third is Samantha Parrington, again, except this time it's done at Val's will. And fourth and finally is the case of Annabelle Riggs. In this case, Valkyrie starts to lose her sense of self and becomes the Doom Maiden of Rage, killing Annabelle during a moment of, well, rage, and she regrets it. So she goes to Valhalla, something she's very used to doing, and retrieves Annabelle's soul with the help of another sorceress. But the deal is that Annabelle has to share Valkyrie's body. So there they are, the 4, or really 3 mortal forms of Valkyrie other than Brunhild. At number 3 is that Valkyrie was in fact introduced alongside the Avengers in an Avengers comic, or against them to be more exact. First appearing in the Avengers 83 in 1970, Valkyrie is shown leading a team of Lady Liberators fighting against the Avengers. Although this is the perfect first shot of Valkyrie showing her strength and integrity as a strong female character in all her glory, it turns out just to be the Enchantress putting on an impersonation of Valkyrie. But before she truly appears in her first legitimate form in 1972, another impersonation of her appears in Incredible Hulk number 142 in 1971. This is the time when she appears as Samantha Parrington, as mentioned in the previous entry. So why does Valkyrie appear twice in illegitimate forms before making her first true appearance? It isn't clear, but it's a trend that continues into the character's life as she goes on to rub shoulders with tricky enchantresses and convoluted illusions well into her life as a hero. At number 2 is a fun fact that Valkyrie was actually a teammate of Wonder Woman's mother. But how can Marvel work one of their own into the backstory of a DC character? Well, it all goes back to the beginning of this list where we discussed how Valkyrie is based on a mythological character, Brunhild. And for various reasons, this old tale is unbound by copyright law. Well, so is Wonder Woman's origin story. Hippolyta is known by many DC fans as Wonder Woman's mother, but she's originally known in mythology as the Greek queen of the Amazons and daughter of Ares. And these myths, just like those that Valkyrie is based on, are all fair use by any writer at Marvel Studios. So, in Fearless Defenders, when exploring Valkyrie's origins, we learn that she has fought with Hippolyta in the past, and their task in that moment was to fight off zombie Vikings and Doom Maidens side by side. It's known online to be kind of a bizarre moment considering how different this version of Hippolyta is from DC's interpretation, but it happens. And it's actually a pretty cool moment considering Marvel and DC don't often make attempts at finding common grounds in their storytelling. Finally, at number 1, Valkyrie is the first LGBTQ character to appear on the big screen in the MCU. In the comics, the character is known to be bisexual, and when she appears in Thor Ragnarok, it is confirmed that the character maintains this sexual identity. This is a big deal for many people from this community who had been waiting to see proper representation in the MCU movies. The decision to have the character be bisexual is confirmed by Tessa Thompson, the actor who plays Valkyrie in the film. She tweeted that this decision is in fact true and in line with the original comics, although it isn't explicitly addressed in the movie. Even though Joey Gutierrez from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Jerry Hogarth from various Netflix Marvel series are openly gay, Valkyrie is the first character to represent the LGBTQ community in the films. It's a pretty good accolade for a character that I think we've learned through this list would make these communities proud.